Welcome to the Black Male Impact. Today we have as guest Mr. Willie Mickell. Mr. Mickell, welcome to the Black Male Impact.
Thank you, Dr. Cross, for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
It's a pleasure. But before we get into the conversation, Mr. Mickell is an educator. He works in higher education for over 20 years, and he's a dedicated individual who loves to impact, especially students. But before I say anything else about Mr. Mickell, I will give him the opportunity to share with you more about himself before we get into the conversation itself. Mr. Mickell, go ahead, please.
Yes. Thank you. So I'm originally from Chicago, Illinois. I've spent my career in higher education the past 20 years, working in a number of different areas in student affairs, making an impact on student lives. I've worked in the Office of Admissions, so I have had an opportunity to see students when they enter the university. I've worked with students in athletics. I've had an opportunity to live on campus in the residence hall and work with the students who live in the residence hall and supervise those students, the resident assistants, and things of that nature. I've had an opportunity to also work with student organizations. That was probably one of the bigger roles because that was an opportunity to supervise over about 65 student organizations on the college campus. And currently I work as a career and employee relations specialist at Georgia State University. And in that role, I have an opportunity to talk with students about their career development and just making sure that they're prepared to transition into their careers when they leave the university.
Oh man, that's awesome. And that's a really important role because sometimes if students are not guided in the right way, they may not end up in the right positions or get the right opportunities that they want. So I think that's a really valuable position, especially for students, especially if they haven't had the background in regards to family who have gone through the process, because especially for first-year generation students, college students, having that type of guidance, I believe, is really beneficial to steer them in the right direction. Again, thanks again for being here. And I'm going to jump straight into the questions. My first question to you is, what is the mindset that it takes to make a positive impact?
Well, I believe when it comes to making a positive impact, I think that over time, it starts with self-talk. Okay. So if you're thinking positive thoughts, if you're doing things that's positive, especially on the college campus with students with great intentions, and you have gratitude and humility, I think over time things work out for the betterment. If you get caught up with kind of keeping your head down all the time and saying negative thoughts, then you'll walk down a road where everything that's negative will probably happen.
Well, that is true. And I like your perspective on self-talk, because a lot of times we have the desire to do things. We have the ability to do things, but sometimes we are the same persons who go ahead and talk ourselves out of what we want to do and what we even have the ability to do. So when it comes to making a positive impact, that's a great perspective to have or to be aware of, because you don't want to have the desire to do something and want to achieve something and then talk yourself out of what you want. Because if you talk yourself out of what you want to do, you will never do it. And as you mentioned, if you're not thinking positively, you're more likely thinking negatively. And if negative thoughts takes room in your mind, it's going to affect your life. So I really appreciate that perspective. And it's a great reminder to everyone, because we all have different experiences on our journey. And sometimes it doesn't matter how much you have accomplished, those negative thoughts will come back in your mind.
Yeah, I have this quote that I live by that Jay-Z says. Jay-Z said, it's a song he has called Streets is Watching. And I think about that in higher education. And I tell students quite often that administrators, colleagues, your peers, they're watching you. And if you remain if you remain positive and you're being a team player and you're collaborating and you're being inclusive and you're doing all of these things, you're showing up in a positive light. When you're least expecting and opportunities present itself, they'll think of you because they'll be like, hey, I remember that individual. They showed up to work on time. They were engaging. They had a positive influence on the students around them. I want to recommend them for this opportunity. So you never know who's watching in higher education. So you just always have to have that positive mindset and be authentic with it. That's the key too.
Well, that is true. And I really like that, to be mindful that people are always watching. And as you mentioned, you never know who is going to be in the position to hear of an opportunity. And that opportunity can come directly to you because of who you are and because you have been demonstrating that you're the type of person they would want to work with or provide an opportunity for. So it's always important that we are mindful of how we show up because someone is always watching. And that leads me to my next question. What advice do you have for the men listening and how they can play a role in creating positive change?
That's a very good question.
Thank you.
That's a very good question. I have a quote, another quote that I think about from President Obama. Now, President Obama had a quote that he said, change would not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change that we seek. And so I think that when it comes to your question, I think that the change that we can do is mentorship at school, mentorship in our community, again, having a positive attitude and volunteering in the community. Wasn't until I got older in life and I started to understand the value and the importance of giving back, because a lot of the humility and gratitude and just understanding the challenges and successes as a Black man, just going back to your community and giving back is that's where it starts,
Oh yeah, it's
because
priceless.
the individuals, the young people that's coming after you, they get a chance to see that visual representation of you at your church, showing up to PTA, at your school, helping those individuals less fortunate in the community, and then just uplifting the community as a whole. So
That's well said. And if you don't mind, please repeat the quote because I believe that quote is really profound, especially now when we are thinking about creating change. But go ahead, and then I'm going to respond to what you have said.
sure. The quote is, change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change that we seek.
Man.
And that was something that President Obama ran on during his election time a few years back.
And that's really powerful and profound. And I think that's the mindset as men, Black men, we have to take on now. Going forward, we have to realize that we are the change. We are the ones we've been waiting for to create the change. We should not leave what we can do to the next generation. The next generation is supposed to, when they receive the baton, they should be ahead, further ahead than where we are right now. But as you mentioned about us being mentors and going to our communities and volunteering, it goes back to what you have shared earlier in regards to people are watching. And if we want to inspire the next generation, we have to show up in a way where they can see us and through us what is possible. So I really appreciate you sharing those perspectives. And it's a great reminder to all of us. If we want to see change, we have to be the one to go out there and do what we can. It's not to say we have to do everything. No one can do everything, but we should show up in a way that we can be a great example and models for the next generation. I think that is important.
I totally agree.
Yes. And this somewhat ties to previous question, but how can we as Black men help to change the narrative today?
I think changing the narrative today with social media right now is such a complex thing because a lot of things, one thing that I see with a lot of young men, especially in higher education, is patience. So to change the narrative, one thing is the time it takes for you to go to school, to obtain the degree,
Okay.
to pursue the job, to become the successful Black man that can take care of his family, and those particular images that you know, the status quo that comes with that, that takes time, and that's a process. And a lot of times, a lot of young men don't have the patience, don't have the emotional intelligence, and again, don't have the role model.
Correct.
If you don't have a representation of what that narrative looks like, then the media will tell you how that media should look.
Well, you're right. And that's a great way of looking at it, the patience. Because to change one's life, to create a different narrative, it does take time. And not having role models or not having a guide or the resources can deter some from pursuing what they would really want to pursue. But if you don't mind, for those who may lack the patience or not having the resources or the guidance, how can we reach those or help them to have a perspective? Do we remind them that it takes time? Do we remind them that find a mentor? What would you encourage someone who you may see with the ability, but may not have the resources?
That's a really, really good question. Um, Coming from a single parent home and being in a situation, not having that representation, having an opportunity to talk to people, but not having a specific mentor along the way, that's a very good question. I think that, wow, that's a good question.
Yeah,
I just think, yeah.
yeah, and just because I was listening to you and I realized how important it is because sometimes that not having the patience, right? And but I would say it goes back to what you have said. We can be the example because there are certain things that we cannot really do for the individual. They have to do it themselves anyway. But just being the example, just showing them through our daily activities, but also, as you mentioned just now, growing up in a single home, that story can help them to gain perspective. Like, look, you may be in a situation that you don't like or that's not what you want, but others have been down that path and they have come out. So I think sharing our stories, our challenges, I think will help to kind of gain some perspective or help them to gain some perspective. But I just wanted to follow up and ask that because of what you said, because sometimes it's a lack of patience, not having the desire is there, but no patience. If we don't have the patience, we're not going to achieve the goals that we want to have. But I'm going to go back to you being in education for over 20 years in higher education. So my next question is, what or who has influenced or inspired you to pursue the path that you're on?
That's a good question. There's a lot of individuals that have inspired me on the path of a higher education, just in general. There's one individual, a cousin of mine, Sean Johnson, who's really inspired me during my tough times and transitions, doing higher education at different institutions and things of that nature. Because when I was going through the challenges of the imposter syndrome that comes with being a Black male student or being a Black male professional in different campus environments. And, you know, it's your first time as a student or it's your first time in a leadership role, and just trying to figure out how do you adapt, how do you adjust. Sean was just very encouraging and always told me that, hey, you belong, you are worthy. And my cousin Sean Johnson would always just say, hey, you're worthy, you belong in this, you got this, you can handle this, you can do this. After a while, once again, with those positive thoughts, even when you go through those challenges, just kind of reflecting back to him and a few other peoples that kind of believed in me along the lines, it kind of helps you out when you get into those dark spaces, because then you start to kind of remember that you do belong. There's a reason why you're in this role. There's a reason why the school enrolled you in the program. It's a reason why this job hired you. And now it's up to you to demonstrate those skills and those abilities that you have.
And I really appreciate you sharing that thought, especially on the imposter syndrome. I think as Black men, sometimes we show up in spaces and feel as if we don't belong. And that can be for a variety of reasons. We may not have had individuals who personally guide us, or it's the first time, as you mentioned, that we're going in those spaces. And if we don't see other people who looks like us, so at some point it may feel intimidating, or you may be asking yourself, why am I here? But as you mentioned, that your cousin mentioned that no, they hire you because you meet the requirement. So if you meet the requirement, that means you belong there. And that's a really great reminder to all of us, to everyone, to all of us as Black men, that once we're in a space, we have to believe within ourselves that we are worthy of being in those spaces. We meet the requirements. We should not be thinking less of ourselves just because we may not have the similar experience as everyone else, but everyone have to start somewhere. Now, it must be a reason why we're in the space. And that's really a great reminder as we navigate our way forward, because there will be opportunities. There will be opportunities that may not be something we are familiar with, but we meet the requirements. And we have to show up in those spaces as if we belong in those spaces. So I really appreciate that. But I'm going to go back up to you being in the career services where you help students. And being that you mentioned two very important points, the imposter syndrome, and I will get back to the next one. But do you come across students that feel as if they would not apply for a certain job because they think from the get-go they will not get it?
I do run into some students that feel that way. And I just try to encourage them to apply for the job. I've learned on this journey myself that if you see a job that you feel like your skills and experiences are aligned with, it's better to apply to the job and see what happens versus to live in regrets, wishing that you would have done it. And at the end of the time, if I could just be transparent with you, when it comes to most jobs, at the end of the day, you're going to have to go through some type of training anyway.
All right.
So if it's a job that you really, really passionate about and I just strongly suggest them sit down with me. I'm the career and employer relations specialist. I'll go over your resume. We'll have a talk and we'll kind of discuss your experiences over the last couple of jobs. And then we'll look at the description of the other job and kind of see how we can align those things and see what high points you have, what deficiencies you have, and what experiences you still need to have. You need to have to get the job. And what I found is that a lot of times when I'm talking to students in that tone and a non-judgmental zone, because I have non-judgment in my office, a lot of the times they're a lot more calming. I find out they have more experiences than what they thought, because sometimes when they come to sit down with me, they're already nervous. They're coming, sitting down, talking to me like I'm interviewing them for the job at the moment. But once I get to know them, once they get to know me and they start to get comfortable, then we kind of go over the job description and just start to see how realistic it is. And sometimes it may not be that job. It might be another job. I can point them in a direction that will lead to that job. And so a lot of it is just strategizing. I want to go back to something else you asked me a question early on, something about how could someone change the narrative or cope with their situation. One thing I want to say is that peer mentorship is so helpful.
Okay.
So when you get Black males on a college campus that feel like there isn't a sense of belonging or inclusion and things of that nature, a lot of times it's just a matter of connecting them with like the AAMI groups, because a lot of times once they get in the same room, in the same space, and they hear that folks are coming from the same side of town as them, having some of the same challenges, and hear how those individuals navigated to success, use resources that their student fees was paying for in the beginning, and then gain references and mentorship from faculty and staff, then a lot of times those individuals start to excel and get a little bit more comfortable in the college setting, if that makes sense.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. Having that sense of belonging for those students, especially Black male students, really helps them to navigate their journey. I've come across students before who, after their first semester, well, midway in the first semester, they wanted to go back home. And once that student joined the male initiative on campus, the Black male initiative on campus, he feels as if he belonged at the institution. So that sense of belonging is really important, and especially when they're hearing from students who share similar experiences as they do. I think it helps those students. So that's a great perspective when it comes to helping students to feel as if they belong in an institution. But as you shared with helping students to feel as if they are worthy of the opportunity, sometimes it's just to get to know them and to let them know the qualities that they do already possess, which they may not be aware of or maybe overlooking just because they have the fear or doubt within their own capabilities. So I really appreciate that perspective. And that leads me to my next question. What is your perspective on the current climate of Black men in society today?
My perspective. My perspective is that as a Black man in this day and age, I think one thing that we don't realize is just how powerful we are.
That's right.
We are more powerful than we know or recognize that we are. I don't have a strategy for how to bring everything together in one, to just take everything to the next level of what we all dreamed of from Dr. King's speech and his goals and intentions back in the day. But I just look at it as whether it be higher education with the number of vice presidents that we have in roles as it relates to student affairs, whether it be the entertainers and celebrities that are very, very successful. We have a lot of influence and we have a lot of power, but we've yet to be able to connect all those dots and change the narrative in a way that sets up, as you mentioned before, sets up those individuals that's coming behind us. And I say that without judgment. I don't like to judge, because individuals that are in powerful positions that may make a difference, they have a lot on their plate. And we all can only do so much. You have some people that they're showing up for Thanksgiving, Christmas, birthdays, back to school events, and that's what they can do. And I've contributed in ways myself. So I just say if each person could just do their own diligence in the community as a Black man at your institution, join a student organization, become a leader. I always tell Black males, Black males come to me sometimes, they say, man, Mr. Will, if you had any advice, what would you tell me while I'm in school if I can't play sports, if I can't do this? I say the one thing I tell you to do is join a student organization. Join a student organization and become a leader. And when you become a leader, you're leading an organization, you're leading an executive board, you're collaborating on community service projects, and then administrators across the university become familiar with your leadership. And then you get references from your faculty advisor. And what happens is that when you graduate from college, not only can you put that on your resume, but when you go back to your community and you're doing things, whether it deals with breast cancer awareness, prostate cancer, veteran service, church outreach, community service, things of that nature, you've already gotten those experiences while you're in college.
Correct. That's right. That's
You know,
a
and
great. Oh yeah, that's a great way to encourage those students, because sometimes they don't see the opportunities, or they think it is some other way to get to where they want to be, not realizing that they will have to participate or engage in the process intentionally to get to where they want to be. So that's a really great perspective. And I really appreciate that your point on the current climate of Black men in society today. We have to realize our power. We have to realize the impact that we can make. And sometimes we are aware, but I think sometimes we kind of tone it down because we are wondering what people are going to be thinking when we show up as confident as we want to be, show up and share our knowledge. But we have to do it. We have to do it not just for ourselves, but go back to what you have said earlier in the conversation. So those who are watching, and not just Black students or Black male students, because we have to help others to change their perspective of who we are, because we all are conditioned to think of Black men in a certain way. We too think of each other in a certain way. So when we show up and when we do the things that we need to do and collaborate with each other, we help to change that perspective amongst ourselves and for others to think and see us in a different light. But I really appreciate what you shared earlier, that we have to recognize our power and our contribution and what that contribution can do for us as we go forward on our journey. And that
Yeah.
leads me
Well,
to go ahead.
yeah, and I just want to add, because I always emphasize this to the students, is that before we step outside our own environment and culture and have expectations for others to help us, we have to be intentional about making sure that we're supporting and guiding and mentoring those individuals around us that look like us.
Yeah.
And so you don't have to be a perfect mentor. I'm not a perfect mentor. I'll never be a perfect mentor. But if any student, because I work for all students,
Correct.
but if a Black male student comes to me and they sometimes, if the individual is just like, hey, Mr. Will, I'm confused. I'm trying to figure this out. Sometimes I'll do these activities called lunch and learn. And I have 4 to 5 guys come and I'll say, hey, man, this is no judgment zone. I can't help you unless you tell me what you need help with. I take off my tie, we sit around the table, and we just start to have a conversation about life. And they start to tell me about some of their challenges. And what starts to happen is that I'm able to tell them about the resources that are available right down the hall.
Correct.
I mean, it could be right down out. It could be the Learning and Tutor Center. And that's some of this information they might have gotten when they were going through orientation and things of that nature. But again, you can't have judgment, because a lot of times these individuals, students are coming in, it's their first time in college. Nobody at home is in college. So you can't have an expectation that they're going to remember every single thing. When they show up and they show up for help, my job is to provide them with the support that they need.
Man,
And so
that's
when they come, I'm very empathetic. I have compassion, and I say, hey, how can I help you out? And then a lot of times what I mention to them is that it's okay to go outside your culture to get help.
correct.
That's a part of inclusion. That's a part of collaboration. That's a part of partnership. Because what I can guarantee you is that when you leave your job, when you leave school,
Yes.
and you go for your first job, you're going to start to work with individuals that are different from you, come from
Correct.
different social classes, different backgrounds, and things of that nature. And if you've already had those practices and experiences on the college campus, it'll be a lot easier for you to work in a leadership role or as a team member navigating those different sides. So it all starts in college.
I agree 100%. Students have to gain the skills needed and the characteristics needed, develop those early. And the best place to do so is on campus in college. So I really appreciate that perspective. And that's a great reminder especially for the young people who are listening in and trying to gain insights and knowledge on how they can navigate their way going forward, especially being in college and sometimes a first year generation student. So I really appreciate you sharing that perspective. And that leads me to my next question. And it kind of ties to what you shared with the quote earlier, that we are the change that we need to be. But what change do you want to see in general amongst Black men?
The change that I would want to see as it relates to changing the narrative is more role models, more positive influences, being more intentional and authentic when it comes to being a role model, more father figures, more leaders, again, positive figures as it relates to fathers, brothers, uncles, and friends. And also, I probably want those individuals that start school to finish. And that's a long reach right there because there's a lot of challenges behind the scene that goes into a lot of individuals, such as myself, where you start this path with the intention to start school. And unfortunately, life happens.
Correct.
And sometimes it might take a little longer times than others to finish school for a number of different reasons. But I think the role model thing is probably the biggest thing because if you look at the media and you look at entertainment, whatever side you're on the fence, you can see who are the well-liked individuals and what roles they play in our society and how our kids are looking up to those individuals for a number of different reasons. And so I'm for the arts and I'm for the entertainment, but I think that especially as Black males in our culture, whether it be higher education or entertainment in society, we have to have a balance.
Correct.
And sometimes in some cultures, there's balances. In our culture, sometimes it may be one-sided. And what happens to us, unfortunately, is that in the media, you get one image of what Black males do or look like. So then you get a chance to see this whole other world of success
Correct.
that takes place because there's a whole nother world. We get a chance to see it in higher education. It's not a perfect world. It's not a world that I'm saying every Black male has to be like, but there is a positive world. There's a positive side to it. So I think just having that mentorship. Also, something I had mentioned that I wanted to mention earlier is having a sponsor in the room.
That's right.
Because man, Dr. Cross, there's a big difference between that. I've gone on this path and I'm a first generation student. And all of these years on my path, I've met some wonderful people that were mentors, gave me great advice. But it wasn't until I started to get to this point where I started to have a sponsor.
Right.
See, that sponsor is that person I was talking about when I started off with that Jay-Z quote, streets are watching.
Yeah.
See, that sponsor is the person that when they go in their boardroom, they use their leverage and their reputation on the line to say, hey, you know what? Hey, I think this person would be great for this role. I'm recommending them for this particular role.
That's right. That is important. I tell you, I've gained opportunities because of that, where individuals in the position, they're inside the rooms that are making the decisions. And they say, you know what, Richard Cross would be great for this position. And that's how I've gained some of the opportunities that I was fortunate to receive. So I really agree with what you said. I totally agree with that perspective on having a sponsor because it carries a lot of weight because you can have the qualifications and sometimes your qualifications may not even reach the individuals who are making the decisions. So having someone there to speak on your behalf, it is really great. But you said something that I really wanted to touch on. As you mentioned, there are a lot of us who are successful, but sometimes it is not seen. And I can remember when I just about to start my doctoral degree, and I started to do my own research on Black men in education, I was surprised, to say the least, the amount of Black men who had doctorate degrees, who were presidents, who were superintendents, but it is not the common knowledge. So the young people are not seeing those individuals, and if they don't see it or hear about it, they're not going to have the desire to pursue it. And it's easier to become, has per a quote that I've read some time ago, to become a doctor than a professional athlete. And a lot of our young people, especially our young Black males, don't realize that. And not to say they shouldn't pursue athletics, because I was an athlete myself. That's how I got on my journey or was able to get into college. But if you don't see the other options, because everyone will not become professional athletes. So they need to see the other options, the Black men who are doing great. They may not be overly successful, but they still do have their family and their house and their car and everything is taken care of, and maybe less problem because they don't have all the different
Mhm.
stress to think about. But what you shared in regards to um, being able to see more of the success that Black men are having, it is really crucial to inspire the next generation.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that is important. So I appreciate you sharing that. But my next question is, what was a pivotal moment in your life?
A pivotal moment, as far as my career or
Yeah, it could be, your career. As you said, you were first year generation. Some people, pivotal moment, it was when they get the opportunity to go to college, or sometimes it's on their journey within that really solidify their journey.
Hmm, pivotal moment for me probably would be, excuse me. I think right now I probably think about most recent. I was at an institution for 5 years, and I pivoted from that institution over to Georgia State. And I think that that 5 years, excuse me, I put in a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in that leadership role. And so it wasn't until when I pivoted from that leadership role to my new leadership role that I realized how much I had actually learned,
Oh, wow.
how much I experienced. And then I realized the importance of work-life balance and knowing thyself, taking care of thyself,
Very important.
prioritizing time with family. So I think that that was a pivotal point for me after the pandemic, because before that point, being from up north of Chicago, my work ethic just was different. I mean, just working like 80 hours a week, just going nonstop with the emails, on the communication, getting all the work and the projects done. But again, just realize, so that was just a pivotal point because that was a game changer. It just taught me to, hey, take care of yourself, take care of your health. The work is going to be there. I always get my work done, but just make sure that I start to set boundaries.
Correct. And that's a great reminder for everyone, because
Hmm.
in pursuit of our goals and in doing the things that we are passionate about, sometimes we give ourselves to that thing and not realizing that, oh man, we're not giving ourselves any time, but more so to what we are pursuing or what we want to do or the impact that we want to make. So I really appreciate you sharing that. And I know the listeners will appreciate it because it's a great reminder that on this journey, we should take care of ourselves as we go on the journey, because we don't want to get to the end of the journey and whatever we're trying to accomplish, we're not able to really enjoy it because we haven't take the time to take care of ourselves. So that's really important that you share that point. And that leads me to my next question. What life lesson have you learned late in life that you believe is important and can benefit this current generation?
I'm not sure if this is a life lesson, but I'll tell you a quote that was shared with me. You have not what you ask not for. So a lot of times the things, the resources and the support that we want are right in front of us. And sometimes we're moving so fast that we can't turn to our left, we can't turn to our right to find out that the resource, whether it be financial support, the resource, whether it be someone who's there to listen to us, it's right there. And it's not until you kind of slow down and take a deep breath and kind of just think that you realize that a lot of those things, because I tell students all the time when they say they're overwhelmed, I say, okay, I'm very open, I listen to them, and then I let them know, I say, you know what, we have psychological counseling services. Your fees pay for that. We have a recreation center where you can go and work out at. There's different resources. There's meditation rooms, there's the library. So once you kind of think about it, you start to see, wow, there are some things around here that can help me with this journey.
Right.
And I think that sometimes it's easy to just think, oh, I'm just going to college and then I'm just leaving. But there's a whole nother experience in between the time you leave and the time you arrive. And I think just with my own life lessons that I've learned as a student and as an employee, that you still have those same resources available. Someone to kind of just talk through and process about life challenges, family challenges, the society just in general. A person that's non-biased. I tell students all the time, I had a student laugh at me the other day. It's like, Mr. Will, you really went and chatted with a counselor? I said, let me explain something to you. The best thing about going to a counselor is that that person doesn't know you. They don't know your friends. They don't know your family. So you get a chance to go and vent in a room and talk to them, get some professional advice, and leave out and feel comfortable knowing that it's not like one of your friends on social media that you told them something and now they're telling their 1,500 followers.
Well, yeah, man, but that is true. That is true. But I'll just go back to what you shared with, if you ask not, you will not get. I think that's somewhat, I may change it up a bit, but if you don't ask for the help you want, you're not going to get it. And I think individuals or young people, sometimes they may want the help and they don't ask for it. And, there's a saying within our community as Black men, we sometimes are the ones who are least likely to ask for help, because sometimes we see asking for help as a sign of weakness. But I think I think it was Les Brown said, if you want to think it's a sign of weakness, I'm gaining more knowledge. So I'm going to ask for help. So it helps me to get better. And that's one thing that we have to encourage our young people to realize, especially our Black males, that come on, if you need help, ask for it. I think it's a sign of strength, not weakness, to get help, because you see where you need a way to get better or to improve. So why not, get the help that you need to improve? So I really appreciate you sharing that perspective and the different examples that you have shared with students and even with yourself, that even the student, was questioning, why did you go and get the support? But as individuals or as adults, we have to remember the same advice we give to young people or others, those advice are applicable to us as well. We should not only give the advice, we should take advantage of the advice that we are given. So if we have challenges, why not ask those around us for help and support? But before I ask my final question, I know you have mentioned it a few times, but if you don't mind, where can the listeners find you and help support your work to make a difference?
Right now, I'm in the early stages of developing a website, so I don't have that information that I can provide to you at this moment. But once that information becomes available, I'll be more than happy to share it with you.
Okay. Well, with you on the different social media like LinkedIn, if individuals, being that you talk about career and opportunities and how to get there, I think that's a great way. But without your website, I will still put, if you don't mind,
Oh,
you
sure.
your LinkedIn connection or your LinkedIn,
Yes,
page, in the
I
description.
appreciate that.
Yes, yes, sir. In the description, so individuals who may have questions on their career path or who trying to pivot, maybe can gain some insights from you. And by the time that the website may be ready. And stuff like that. But building the connections with individuals who see the value in what you have to share with them early is always a plus. So that can happen without a website. I think I don't remember where or who I was listening to, and this individual he went on to I think he made about $1 million, and he didn't have a website.
Oh,
He was
wow.
selling T-shirt, and I think he was selling it through one of those platforms, and he didn't have a website. So anything is
Oh,
possible.
wow.
Yeah, anything
Okay,
is
I'm gonna
possible.
remember that.
Yeah, anything is possible, man. If it's your time, those minor things will not really stop things from happening. But my final question to you: what impact do you want to have on the world?
I think the impact that I want to have on the world pretty much kind of extends to what you just said, that I'm beginning to really get clear later on in life. And that is, at the end of the day, anything is possible.
Correct.
And I think from my lens, I just want to be able to inspire the next generation. I want to be able to inspire those individuals like my son, my cousins, my friends' kids, the Black males who are striving and working hard to be successful. My goal is to inspire all students.
Correct.
But being a Black male, the reality of it is this: if you do the research, if you do the data, you will know that when it comes to Black males in college in our society, there's just a whole lot of challenges and things that's taking place. And that these individuals just need a few more resources
Correct.
just to put them on the path to success. I've seen individuals get a little bit more resources, a little bit more mentorship, and then the sky's the limit. Graduate with an engineering degree, a business degree, become doctors, lawyers. So I think the impact that I will want is just sharing the knowledge. That's one thing in our community that I would like to see change, is just sharing the knowledge, sharing the information. So those individuals coming behind us have a blueprint for
Correct.
what that success looks like. So they can say, oh, wow, this can take place. At least have some options.
Correct. Correct. And that's a great way to live our lives, to be an inspiration for others, to let others know through us what is possible, especially when we know there are challenges and there are sometimes lack of information or resources that can prevent some from going forward and achieving what they want out of life. So I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge and insights today, Dr. Mickell. It's a pleasure having you here on the Black Male Impact.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Cross. I really appreciate your time. And I just want to say thank you so much for having me today.
It's a pleasure. And as always, listeners, the goal here is to bring individuals who we know will share knowledge and insights that can be beneficial as we continue on this journey to create positive change. Please continue to support us in whatever way possible as we look forward to make in your life and the lives of others who are coming behind us better. Continue to support us on the Black Male Impact. Again, we see you next time.